In this video, I'm going to show you how to build a deck fast, cheap, easy, and floating. And if you're new to this channel, my name's Josh. This channel is all about DIY to save a ton of money. So be sure to subscribe, ring that bell so you get notification every time I release a new video, and hammer that like button for me. That's all I ask in return for making this video. So we got a lot to go over today, so let's get started. We're going to be building this deck using pressure treated material, and it's going to be floating, meaning it's not going to be anchored to the ground. And we're going to be using 4x4 posts wherever the deck is going to be in contact with the ground. You don't want to use the boards themselves, the 2x6s, because they'll rot prematurely because they're not rated for ground contact. So we're going to go with the back being level with the ground, and we're going to cut out a spot to put the 4x4 posts laying down as a place to start off the ground. This is where we're going to be building the floating deck. The dimensions of this deck is 24 by 10, and we need to make sure that we get this back 4x4 post into the ground level. So that's where I have my laser level set up. We're going to check the grade and then level out a spot, a little trench, to put the 4x4 post laying flat. So we're going to get started doing that first before addressing the front of the deck. With the laser level on, I'm going to check the grade back here to over where the end of the deck's going to be to see how much slope there is, to know how much to dig out. Right here we got 22.5 inches. Over here we got about 27. So roughly about 5 inches to go from here to here. So we're going to start at 5 inches and digging down to nothing where it daylights out from the ground here. So as we dig down here, we're going to check to make sure we hit about 27 inches, which is the same as where it comes out of the ground on the slope. So if we keep that at 27 inches as we dig, that's going to get us in the rough area where it needs to be setting. If you're building a deck like this on more level ground, you could do this method on the front and back of the deck. Because the front's a little more elevated, we're going to use posts, but this back we're going to put on a runner. I placed the first 12-foot 4x4 post into the trench that we dug. I'm going to check around the 4x4 post to make sure that we're setting level. If we put this here, we have 22.5. Come down here, we got 22.5, a little heavy, but that's okay, that's fine where it's at. But you want to make sure if you have a bow to put your bow up, and these are never perfectly straight, but you want to use your flattest side. So if you have a real big bow, this one, it actually ain't too bad, but you want to make sure you use a flat side to where the biggest bow is not prominent. So if we're going to lay this here, lay the next one in, and then that will be it for our foundation or footer in the back. All right, we're going to lay this one into the trench, and we're going to secure this one to this one by toe screwing it into it so it doesn't come apart. And then we're going to again check this to make sure we are level. And if you feel like you need to, you could also put a gravel base here and get that really level before setting this. For this river camp, we're not too concerned about getting this perfect, but that looks pretty good what we got. Using decking screws, we're just going to place this through this board or post into this post. That looks good and flush on this end. I'm going to put one here on this side. So that keeps it bound together pretty good. We're now going to take this edge off this dirt so that our joists don't hit the ground. If you're enjoying this type of content, then you'll definitely want to check out the Excellent Labor course membership. Get instant access to all the DIY courses and downloads for just $5 a month at the time of this recording. And the best part, the library is growing, but your price won't if you lock it in today. Check out the link in the description to get started. To secure the 4x4 post to the ground, you could drill through it and drive rebar, and it'll also help pin the post. Because the 4x4 runner is partially in the ground, that is going to be what secures this runner in the ground. Because we're going to use the edge of this camper as the edge of the deck starting out, we're going to plumb right off the edge of it and place a stake so that way we have a solid mark to go off of for our straight line to start our layout for the footers for the post up front. Right? And we're going to mark the other side of the camper. These are the decking boards we're going to be using, and it's important to get this measurement before building the frame so you have an overhang. You don't have a cut piece that's ripped off the edge at the end. You don't want to have an inch rip. That's not good. So if we take a measurement here, we got 5.5 inch of coverage per board. So if we use 22 rows to cover this 10-foot wide deck, That's going to give us 22 rows and comes out to 121 inches. So we want to make sure our frame's a little smaller so that way we have an overhang around the edge. We're going to go with 119 inches to give us plenty of room for an overhang. Because this stake represents the back line that we're going to go off of, we're going to measure 119 inches off that to place a stake here to get our footers for the front. Okay. All right, we'll do the same to the other side. Okay. Now that we have our stakes in place, we can run a string line across the front. In order to lay out for the post, we need to know exactly where our corners are going to be. This far corner where that stake is our corner we're going to be starting out. So we're going to measure off that and mark 23 foot 11. Because again, you want to make the frame a little smaller so that we have an overhang. We're going to be using 16 foot long pressure treated decking boards with an 8-footer to make our length. So it's going to be just a little over 24 feet because they're typically a little longer. So we're going to mark 23 foot 11 on this edge. Now that we have our 2 back corners, we're going to get our diagonal measurements to know exactly where our front's going to hit. So we got to square up for our footers. Using my 2 100-foot tapes, I'm going to hook one here to this corner, then one to that back corner, and pull my diagonal. And I did a little cheat method here. I punched it into my diagonal measurement calculator and it gave me 25 foot 10.7 inches. So I can get that diagonal and then check the front to make sure we're spaced correctly. And then we're going to be square. So we're going to get our diagonal measurements now. 25 foot 10 3/4. Now that we know where our 2 front corners are, we're going to measure right in the center because we're just going to have 3 posts supporting this front board. Using marking paint, we're going to mark this corner now that we have it laid out before we dig it out so we don't lose it. Then I'm going to do that where each footer is going to be. For these front posts, we could use just typical deck blocks to stick this on top of and just level this ground out a little bit. But because they didn't have any local, we're just going to dig down and place this fast setting concrete mix and just level it out a little bit and let it harden. And then we're just going to put it right on top of that. Again, if I had those blocks, I would just use those. You could even use a cinder block here if you really wanted to. But we just want to put a little footer in for the post. Because this is a floating deck, it does not have to be below the frost line. It's just something to set the post on. After digging the hole, we placed the concrete mix in the hole, add water, and then we leveled it out using the post. And the great thing about this fast setting concrete mix is that after you add water, within 30 minutes, it's going to be set up enough to work on top of. All right, because we can't see the laser level because it's getting too bright out here, we're going to use a 2x6 and place the 4-foot level on top of that in order to mark the height of the post before cutting it. Very simple to do. We're just going to get this level with our post next to it, then mark underneath the board for our height. Okay. So now we have a mark on the post where to cut it. You could cut this on a miter saw, but I'm just going to use a circular saw and mark around the post and then cut it to length that way. All right, our first post is cut and we're going to do that process to the other 2. We will be adding posts in between these posts as well later on this video, but this is just to get the frame built up off the ground. All right, using 2 12-footers, we're going to get our layout on them and butt them tight together and then cut the last one to length. So we're going to do that now. I'm going to be doing a 16 on center layout. If we pull over to the tape to 16 off the edge, we want to come back 3/4 of an inch and make a mark, then place an X on the 16. Now, if it was 1 foot on center, if that's what you're going with, just come back 3/4 of an inch, make a mark, then put your X on 1 foot. So I'm going to continue this layout for this whole board. And a little tip, all the 16 on centers are marked in red so you can't miss them. Using a speed square, everywhere we have a mark for our layout, we're going to place a straight line. So now when we line up our joist, we can line it right onto this X and line it up with that line, and we'll be good to go. Do this at every mark. If you're having trouble marking on the wet pressure treated wood, you could use a scribe tool and it would just score the wood so that way you can mark it easier. Here is our mark for 23 foot 11 inches. We're going to cut this last board to length. Because we want to have 119th from the edge of the frame to the edge of the frame for our boards to work out right, we need to cut down each joist to 114.5. The reason why that is, we're going to have a double 2x6 up front, and that's going to act as our header, and then one in the back. So if we subtract 4.5 inches from the 119, that gives us 114.5. So we got to cut all of our joists to 114.5 inches. So we're just going to cut it just like we did for that other 2x6 for each one. We had a good system going on here. He marked the boards while I cut them, and we had it done in no time. These 4 12-footers are going to be for our front board that's going to support the joist. So we want to cut these 2 front ones 11 foot 11.5 inches, so that way it breaks right on the center of this post. So we're going to go and cut those and then place together the outside boards onto the post and set everything up to have a frame to nail our joist to. Here's a good tip. Whenever you're selecting the boards as the face of the header, make sure you select boards that are really clear and look good visually because they will be exposed. Using my framing nailer, I have 3-inch galvanized nails that are ring shanked. I'm going to put together the outside frame and then tack it to the post. So that way we get a start here on our deck. Because after we do that, we can go ahead and put our joists in and get the framing done. So I'm going to put together the outside boards to get our square frame going. When I secured the post to the boards, I used deck screws and drove them up from below through the post into the board to secure the post to the board. A quick recap what we just did there. We cut this rim joist just 1.5 inches longer so that way we could tack on the front of the header board. And this is going to act, like I said, as a support for our joists. But we want to make sure we can tie into this corner so that way it laces in, and I'll show you finishing that up here in just a minute. And then we went in and shot everything on using the nail gun. And what we did do after that was square it up, make sure it's setting square, checked with our level, and everything's setting level so our frame is setting exactly where we want it. So we're going to finish up this beam, and then we're going to put together our joists onto the layout. What I'm going to do now is break another 12-footer right here in the center to start our beam. Now something that is important to note here, you definitely want to add another post at this break. So we're just going to hold this flush and nail it right into place here. On this 2-ply 2x6 beam, I try to place 3 nails 16 inches apart on the front and back to sandwich the boards together. Now that we got the second ply on the header, we know exactly where this post is going to be, so we're just going to knock the dirt out here and place a post to support where that break is. I followed the same process I did with the other post, dug the hole, put in the concrete mix, let it set up for 30 minutes, then place the post on top of that. Now that we have our header together and we have our additional posts, we're set and ready to go. We need to make sure we put our layout starting from this side on the back side here. Whenever we put our joist together, we want it to follow the same layout as the back side, of course. So we're going to put the layout here and then install the joists. And when we put the joists in, we need to make sure they're crowned up. That's the bow in the board. So that way when weight goes down on the joist, it flattens out. After placing the layout on the header, we jumped over to installing the joists. I shot 3 nails into the band board that's closest to the camper, and then I just tacked 1 nail on the layout and made sure it was flush with the header, and this just temporarily held it into place. So by the time that we got all these done, we had them all set and ready to install the joist hangers. The side of the joist that's closest to the camper that is sitting on top of the runner does not need any hangers because the runner clearly holds the weight. To install the joist hanger, I use a metal strap nailer. It makes it much quicker and easier. If you don't have a metal strap nailer, which most people won't, you would have to buy what are called Tico nails. Those are meant for metal straps and joist hangers, and you would use those and install a nail in each hole on the hanger to secure it. I'm going to begin installing the decking boards from the front of the deck, and I'm going to measure back 4.5 inches because our board is 5.5 inches, and that gives us a 1-inch overhang. After we make a mark at this side of the deck and the other side, we're going to chalk a line so we have a straight line to go off of. All right. Right there. When installing the decking boards, I'm going to give myself a 1-inch overhang here and then line all these up with a 1-inch overhang and then cut the ends. And you want to make sure that if the board has a cup, to put the cup up so water doesn't lay in it. And we're going to simply just line it up with our chalk line and then run that first row perfectly straight with it.
Another thing that's important is make sure that you break on a joist when you continue running the boards.
All right, and I'm just going to nail it down. I usually would screw this down, but the owner would prefer to nail it for a quicker job, so that's what we're going with. And now we just tack down this first one, then I'll go back through and nail them all off after we got them down.
While running the deck boards, we started out with an 8-footer, then we're going to go to a 16 to finish up each run. And then on the next row, we're going to alternate to the 16-footer first, then the 8-footer to finish. The main point here is you don't want to break 2 consecutive rows on the same joist. You want to make sure you keep them staggered. As long as we start with a 1-inch overhang and then break on a joist, then whatever's left over we'll cut off, and we'll also cut off the end that we started with as well.
When you're installing these pressure-treated boards, these cracks are inevitable. They're going to be happening while you're installing them. Best thing to do is get some hand drive nails. These are just galvanized spiral 3.5 inch. What we're going to do is just pry over using this pry bar, and then we're going to close this gap and drive a nail to get it even tighter. And that's really the best way to drive this out. And if you don't have dirt below like that, you can scab a board here on a slope and then pull it towards you to leverage that close as well. So we're going to go ahead and drive this closed. All right, so you can see that is significantly better. You might not be able to get it all out, but try to get the most out as you can. And with these pressure treated boards, you want to close this gap as tight as possible, because once they dry out, it's going to gap naturally. So put them tight while you install them.
If you run into a situation like this where you'll notice the butt joint is not square and there's a gap, it's a simple fix. Use your speed square, make a straight line, and then cut that using your circular saw and then place it back together. And if you already nailed the board down, you could use an oscillating tool to square it first before installing the next board. When installing the decking boards, I like to place one nail in the joist on each joist as we install the boards. That just marks where the joist is, and then I'll go back through and nail it off later. After you get a good pattern and system going, you can get a lot of decking done fairly quickly, especially when you're using a nail gun. Now, if you're screwing it down, it's going to take a little more time. Screwing it down is definitely a better option, but this went really fast.
Now that we got all the boards down, we got to cut the ends so that they're straight. And you want to key off the shortest one. If you look, it looks like this one's probably the shortest one. So that's going to be the minimal we want to go. That looks like about an inch. Let's see. 1.5 inches. Yep, so that is the shortest one, so we're going to go an inch, so our blade goes right by that and then cuts off everything to an inch. Yeah. All right, now we just take our circular saw and cut on that chalk line.
If you have a track saw, this would be a great place to use it. It's going to cut straight and quick. It's going to make this process really easy, but another great option would be to clamp a board down to the deck, so that way you have a guide to go off of for a perfectly straight cut if you're not comfortable following a chalk line. I first nailed off as much of the deck as possible off the ground, so that way it's a little easier to get to. After that, I got on top of the deck to nail the rest off, and I put 2 nails at each joist, and anywhere the nail did not sink, he finished it off with a hammer, so that system worked out great for us. If you're enjoying this type of content, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter. You'll get free building and DIY tips straight to your inbox. Here's the deck after it was finally done. You can see it's nice, level, and flat, and looks really good. And also right here where you see underneath of the deck, we're actually going to be backfilling this, so it's going to secure those posts from moving, and it's actually going to raise the ground level, which is going to be helpful. The total cost for this deck was right around $1,100. But above all, the most important part, the owner was very pleased and happy with the deck.
That was a good day's work. We got this whole thing done in about 7 hours. Wouldn't you say about 7 hours? All right, so about 7 hours to do this with 2 guys. Very simple, easy deck to do. You want to let this dry and cure out for at least 3 or 4 months. In the middle of the summer, right now it's early spring, it's going to be a good time to put stain on this, and you want to do that every year. Now, if you would like to see how I installed Trex decking, check out this video. It'll help you out.